Old Game Plus here, and today we're talking about the influence of Street Fighter 2, which had an anniversary the other day, on game playing and games in the arcade.
And it was a big change to the arcade because early days in the arcades you used to take your 20-cent pieces and you go around, you play. You had your favourites, but you play a lot of different games, a bit like a buffet.
Yeah.
And then you'd have co-op games, Double Dragon, things like that, where you'd play with each other. Street Fighter was a fundamental change to how games were played.
Yes, you weren't playing with each other after Street Fighter came. You were playing against each other. You were proving how good you were at the game and how good you were against your peers. And that was a fundamental change in gaming, because to prove how good you were at a game, you would have to say, oh, that's my high score there on the screen. But from now on, you had to face someone face to face, live, and prove how good you were.
And you'd stay on the arcade machine, a bit like a pool table in a pub. So the person who was winning got to stay. And it made it quite intense competition in most places.
And we've been competing in games ever since, shooting, racing, and beating each other to a pulp ever since.
Now, we'd like to get views from everybody else on the show, what they played, and because we're talking fighting, let's do a montage.
The first time I ran into a Street Fighter arcade machine was when Mum dragged me to the shops, and it was just standing there as an oasis away from boredom. Between the photo shop and the fruit vendor, I played as Blanka, I spammed the punch button, and that pretty much sums up my style with fighting games to this day.
So my Street Fighter 2 experience was limited in the fact that the local milk bar only had Mortal Kombat. However, I was one of the first kids to figure out that you could sweep out of Blanka's electricity, which made me a god. However, the game that I did play a lot of in the Street Fighter universe is Street Fighter 3. So I definitely thank Street Fighter 2 for existing, because I wouldn't have that, or Marvel vs. Capcom, or Super Puzzle Fighter, or Street Fighter. You get what I'm saying.
My first experience with Street Fighter 2 was the Game Boy port, and unfortunately, having two face buttons, I wasn't exactly open to the realm of depth and possibility with the combo system. Immediately afterwards, I came across an arcade cabinet of Hyper Fighting with the 6-button layout. I was surely confused at first, but I had so much fun and so much wonderful memories relearning the game.
So it was 1991, and you gotta remember that back then, most games had sprites which were that big. And then you have Street Fighter 2, which had sprites which were that big. And then, Hadouken, Shoryuken, what are they saying? This game is awesome.
My first experience with Street Fighter 2 was when I went into my old arcade, and my favourite cab, which was the Double Dragon one, had been replaced by Street Fighter 2, and I did not like that. My favourite character, once I started to play Street Fighter 2, happened to be Chun-Li, and I loved her move where she would grab people out of the air and throw them to the ground.
I guess my first interaction with Street Fighter would probably be X-Men versus Street Fighter. It wasn't actually a Street Fighter game by itself, but I was young, I had my friend's PS1, I think we only had one controller. It was before the time when I actually knew how to do moves, I was just mashing. I think it was only one controller, but I stole it off him.
And that was some of the crew's view on their first time with Street Fighter. And you always remember your first time.
Yes, and if you want to see more Street Fighter 2 history and a little bit more, you can check out our video about that online.